Welcome to this video lecture on technology and innovation management. This video is part of a three-part series about technology and innovation management and the role of digital technology to the firm. In this third part, we talk about how firms managed technology in the past and what is different now. Since the advent of the internet in the late 90s and since the advent of that digital age in the 2000s, we have established now that technologies are no longer just on the computer screens in the back office, and they're also no longer only what the IT department does in the firm. Instead, digital technology is now what everyone inside or even outside the firm is doing. IT is used by any is used by any firm department, not just the IT department, and even sometimes by third parties, including competitors or even end users and consumers of a firm. So this matters to technology management because it's no longer the responsibility or even the sphere of control of the traditional IT department of a firm, namely the organization constellation, the teams whose job it is to manage technology. And what is different here is not only that this locus of control is different, also what they're doing with IT is different. Firms, any department, competitors, users, they are not just enabling traditional value chains operations. No, they are changing product, services, and processes. And they change them not necessarily to increase productivity and operational efficiency, as was traditionally done by a firm, but they are innovating and generating and creating and capturing different types of value, even at the expense of productivity gains. To give you one example, in my lectures, I often give the story of the introduction of Woolworth mobile shopping app in 2012, as companies like Amazon and others increased the consumer demand to have mobile shopping solutions available. So Woolworth responded and offered an app to do mobile shopping. What is important here to realize is that this app wasn't actually created by their IT department, which they had. This app was created jointly by the store operations team and the marketing team. So the marketing and store operations team literally launched an app outside without even asking, so to speak, the IT department. What you see on the right-hand side, which meant that later the IT department then had to integrate this new app with some of the other technology it already had that were enabling operations such as logistics, replenishment, promotion planning, cash systems, and so forth. The app initially couldn't do that because it was, the marketing people just build a nice app, and then later only, after people were already using it, it had to be integrated with the rest of the architecture and the rest of the infrastructure that was required in Woolworth to operate, and do shopping, so to speak. So what this is meant to illustrate is a shift that digital technology signifies, a shift in the way that IT is owned, controlled, and used. Traditionally, from the IT department that used technology as an enabling resource to gain productivity improvements and operational excellence, to a ubiquitous digital infrastructure that anyone inside or outside the firm can use for innovation. So on the bottom, you see this. So in the old days, prior to the digital age, technology was what the IT department in the company was doing. Now, digital technologies are used by all departments of the company and even by competitors and computers. In the old days, digital technology was provided, controlled, managed, and deployed by the IT department. Now, it's just a piece of ubiquitous infrastructure. Technology is literally everywhere that anyone can use. A good example for this specific point is what is known as BYOD, bring your own device. The situation that even if you didn't have a smartphone as part of your work package, you still had a smartphone. You still had a laptop. And at some point, people said, why can't I use my laptop? Why can't I use my phone? Well, how can I get my office email to work on my private phone and vice versa? So this phenomenon is called bring your own device. And initially, historically speaking, the IT departments literally had policies that said, you can't bring your own device. Well, you have to use your office computer. You have to use your work phone for stuff like this, because they wanted to control the IT usage in the company for good reasons, of course, for safety, security, protection, and all these sorts of things. Over time, what is very common now is that this policy literally went overboard. Yes, people can bring their device. You can download work content into your home, and you can take your home devices and bring them to work. Yeah, so it's literally a ubiquitous piece of infrastructure. And finally, the old situation was technology was a firm resource, an enabling firm resource used to generate productivity gains by optimizing operational efficiency. So we didn't make money with technology, we didn't sell it, but we used it to decrease our costs of operations by making them faster, better, more consistent, cheaper. What we see now is technology is not so much used for operational efficiency gains to lower the cost, but rather to increase the value of our offerings. So literally that we can make more money, sell more products, sell better products, and so forth. So we use them to innovate product, service, and processes, not to gain productivity improvements. Now, this is important because this shift, this shift that has been heralded in these three areas is very, very difficult for incumbent organizations to manage. What I mean with incumbents here are firms that already existed before the digital age. Yeah, so that existed prior to the advent of all the changes we discussed, around the year 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, and whose original business model is not fundamentally based on digitalization. So I'm excluding here, sort of young organization, startups, or any other companies that started and, to develop and grow in the digital age itself, because basically they didn't bring forward any debt. But of course, most companies, especially in a company in like an industrial age economy like Germany's, were already existent, in trade, in manufacturing, in engineering, in coal and steel, insurance, banks, anything like that, retail. They're all incumbent organizations, meaning that they existed prior to that shift occurring. So that meant that they were in the old situation and now had to deal with the new situation. And one way in which this was very apparent is because especially large, but most incumbent organizations already have an IT department, usually spearheaded by a person that we call Chief Information Officer. So they literally have an organizational structure, people's roles, processes, job descriptions that were existing in that old situation with the old demands, and now that have to change with the new demands. So innovation instead of implementation, value creation instead of process optimization, new development instead of maintenance and control and updating and safety and security and so forth. This has led to what is called a clash of competing capabilities, namely that firms have traditionally built IT capabilities, and we discussed them, innovation, adaptation, acquisition capabilities, to manage the IT, and these existing capabilities are now fundamentally at odds with the new desired emergent capabilities. In other words, we want the teams and firms to do something that they don't know how to do because they've trained to do something else. So, for example, most IT firms and incumbent organizations are pretty good at developing software, rolling out software, offering support for software, maintaining software, updating software, and so forth. And just to give you one quote, which is from the CIO at the time of Woolworth in the year 2010 to 14, and he told me, I'm not good in this digital age. I know how to implement SAP in 8,000 stores. I can do that. If you give me a new piece of software and ask me to roll it out in 8,000 stores over in the course of a week, I'm very good at that. What I don't know is how to be innovative, how to create new offerings, how to be generative and innovative. I don't know how to do that. And this is, I think, a quote that illustrates this clash of competing, this clash of existing versus desired capabilities very well. So what are these new desired capabilities from these changes that were signified with the advent of digital technologies? First, the new expectations were a value orientation. So we wanted technology to generate revenue streams as a goal instead of optimizing asset deployment and cost efficiency and operational improvements. So we no longer just want to make our main value chain operations better through better enablement. Instead, we wanted to be part of the value chain. We wanted to be a main activity to generate revenue. So this is called value orientation. Second, we want the mode of operations in the IT department to be different. So in the past, IT departments operated in well-planned, deterministically determined change projects that were safe, secure, well orchestrated, and therefore, of course, also sometimes slow, so to speak. That didn't gel well with this demand for new products, new services, new changes, reprogrammability, anyone, right? For that, we wanted them to be able to experiment with new technologies as they came about, new content, new layers, new components that came about into the market. Give you one example, all the firms want to explore how they can use ChatGPT now. But for that, you can't have a well-planned, deterministic, one-year-long release cycle with safe and secure planning purposes. Instead, you need to be able to experiment and explore and have a go at it and so forth. So this experimental working mode was alien to most incumbent firms in the way that they traditionally manage technology. From safe, secure planning to unknown experimentation and exploration. And this you can also view as the IT departments, the way that technology was managed in a firm had to change, how they modeled their operations. So traditionally, you can see an IT department as sort of like a project management office that you would have in industrial engineering companies. So with project planners, controlling, use case analysis, business case analysis, a classical project management type of job. That's how IT departments were run. But now with this value orientation, experimental working, these operations should be modeled on startups, like loose, emergent, we just have a go at it, let's see what we find kind of working mode. And finally, and I mentioned this already, the location of the IT department was no longer in the back office as an enabling resource and an enabling support activity of the firm that supports the value chain. No, instead, it was supposed to be a key part of the value chain, within the value chain, not to support it anymore. And this is really what clashed. So for value orientation, you typically had in traditional IT management, you had cost-saving capabilities. They were really good at this. They were all BPM experts. They knew how to do process improvement. They had Six Sigma specialists, lean improvement, capabilities, these sorts of things. They were very good. In the new area of new digital technology management, they wanted to have capabilities allowed to enhance and extend revenue generation, which classes with classical process optimization strategy. Second, the goal achievement, they had typically very good at high capabilities in risk aversion. And instead, we now needed new operational capabilities that focus on heavy experimentation and exploration. The reference industry moved away from project managing in an industrial organization to being modeled on that on startup. And the location was no longer in internal back office operations, but instead front and center customer-facing operations. So to give you one example of what that looks like, these new capabilities to what we want them. And the story here is again from my experience in Australia around the time that the digital age started, and the leading retailer Woolworth, similar to Walmart in the US or Edeka, Rewe, Aldi, Carrefour in France. So a classical bricks and mortar retailer with, that they had a dominant market position around the time that Amazon started delivering the Amazon Prime model. That, forget about the media content, which allowed you to purchase items online and get them delivered to your home at no cost. That was the key thing, right? So Amazon was a digital retailer of consumer goods, first books, later essential hardware media, but also, groceries, for example. And the key difference, of course, was they are a digital age company. They still didn't even exist. They only existed online. And Woolworth is a classical incumbent organization that existed before the advent of digital technologies. They have about 4,000 stores. In the digital age, with the changes in demand, they also started offering a mobile shopping solution with home delivery because customers expected that. And I explained to you how they actually had the marketing and operations, not even the IT department, initially developing this solution. So how they organized it, interestingly, is that people could now shop online through the mobile app, but then actual employees in the physical stores had to do order fulfillment. So literally, Woolworth employees were running around in the stores and adding the items from the mobile shopping application into a physical shopping basket, putting in a package, and then doing the home delivery. Yeah. And only years later, they started building what they called the dark stores, so online fulfillment centers that they would then start using to fulfill the online orders as more of them came and it interfered with the traditional store operations. They launched one in the Sydney area in 2014 and only added a second one, I believe, in 2020 in the Queensland Greater Brisbane region. So these are the two online fulfillment centers. And of course, these stores, so to speak, these dark stores, look nothing like a normal store because they don't never see any customers. What is also important to realize is here that for this incumbent traditional bricks and mortar operation, their delivery, their products need to make a profit. So that means that you have to incur additional cost, for example, for home delivery, because that is actually an added operational cost for Woolworth. They need home delivery people, they need some of the employees in the stores to do the shopping for the customers, and this adds onto the price. So home delivery is more expensive than you going shopping, which is classical business logic, of course. That is in stark contrast to an organization such as Amazon that is a digital age company and never existed prior to that and didn't have any of these debts, so to speak. Their prime model is the source of revenue. And all the actual physical retail operations, procurement, storage, logistics, and even delivery are actually cost centers. So their delivery doesn't actually make a profit. Actually, in case at times, it can even incur a cost as long as the subscription model supersedes these costs, of course. So as long as the digital revenue generation, the subscription model, where we know now that it also, Prime is not just a home delivery service, it also has media content, exclusive shows, and God knows what other types of digital content. And as long as that makes money, it doesn't even require the other parts of the value chain. In classical bricks and mortar retail operations, they could potentially even incur a loss to still be profitable. And that is the huge difference in how they manage that technology, as opposed to how a classical bricks and mortar retailer tries to also offer digital offerings and services, but still requires, everything to make a profit in quite a different way. So the question, of course, now is, in wrapping up, how do firms deal with this capability dilemma? That they realize that they have existing capabilities that are out of demand and new emerging requirement capabilities that are desired, that they need. And there is a couple of different strategies available to the firms in how they do this. One of them is a technological solution by trying to develop digital products as platforms so that they can open them up to competitors or complementers, other third parties, that perhaps thereby bring capabilities into their realm of access, even though they don't have them themselves. So a company that uses this strategy is Philips from the Netherlands. They are very good at medical techs and medical products, diagnosis, hardware and things like this. And they're increasingly platformatizing these products and offering an online medical e-health suite, I think it's called the Philips e-health suite, that allows, of course, to control their own products, but also add other digital products and capabilities and services from other parties. A second strategy is a financial strategy, namely that you buy those capabilities that you don't have so you can internalize these competencies. A good example for such a strategy is what Volkswagen has been doing with the advent of digital cars, and they're realizing that they don't have the algorithmic capabilities, the software capabilities, in general, the ATD capabilities that they now require for their products. What they've done is they didn't develop them in-house. They literally bought software development companies and scaled them up. So they bought, for example, Carmack, which is one software provider that is specialized on in-car information systems, which was about a couple hundred people big, and tell them, look, we buy you and we're making gonna go big because we need more of you. You need to grow to 1,000 people, for example. A third strategy could be organizationally, that you change the way that you innovate or how you engage in knowledge sharing or alliances to collaborate with other firms. NASA, Lego, Starbucks, these are all examples. They're famous, especially for open innovation tactics, which are that they opened up, organizationally speaking, they're in a product innovation processes and product development process to allow outsiders from outside the firm to engage and bring capabilities that they didn't have in-house. So these are all strategies to sort of tap into capabilities that you didn't have. One particular one, of course, is this acquisition and integration capability. So you try to find the capabilities you want outside, but you want to bring them in-house, integrate them. And one way of doing this are these examples of idea labs, sabbatical, on-site research, extended workbench, or grand challenge centers that firms increasingly engage in, where different ways, they're slightly differently organized, but they all share the idea that firms open themselves up to bring in talent, whether it be students, entrepreneurs, or in fact scientists or research and development specialists, to come into their organization and bring these capabilities that these people have into the organization. A second way is that all companies, most of the incumbent companies, are now adopting different new ways of working that are more aligned with digital technologies. And the classical examples are agile principles, DevOps, the Spotify model, holacracies, and so forth. All of these are examples of organizational ways of working, how teams operate, how we manage projects, how we do leadership, and so forth, based on different principles that are more suited to the digital age. AXA has been doing this, Provincial is doing this, Edeka is trying that, Olympus is doing this, or Volkswagen is trying to adopt an agile transformation for its car manufacturing. All of these are organizational responses to build those capabilities that they now need, but they never had. Corporate garage model is a model that SAP did. So there's different ways in which organizationally people at organizations try that. And I guess one of the takeaways now that we've seen this for about 10 years is there's no one right way of doing this. There's different ways of organizational restructuring your ways of working. And companies do struggle with finding the one model that fits to their specific situation. Changing innovation process, I mentioned that. A classic example here, a well-known example is this idea of open innovation. Here, example from NASA and Starbucks, where they opened up problems or product development situations to outsiders, even customers or nerds. So for example, NASA engaged a variety of software developers in a community called Topcoder to help them with specific innovation problems they had for their spaceflight missions. Yeah, in Starbucks, they launched a platform called MyStarbucksIdea.com, where they basically asked their clients, their customers, what type of products they should offer, how they should run their stores, and everything else. And a final example here is what I call alliances. So firms, even competing firms, deciding to work together to form an alliance, a partnership, to together develop or benefit from capabilities that they individually don't have. Yeah. One example is the UN working together with the technology firm Huawei to build a platform for collaboration and knowledge sharing, to be better at knowing how to apply AI in industry and manufacturing. The United Nations doesn't know that, Huawei doesn't know that, and together that alliance makes sense. A similar example, or a slightly different example, is an alliance called Power for All Alliance. And this is actually an interesting alliance because it's actually made up out of competitors. Bosch, Kübler Workwear, Perfect Throw, and there's a list of 10 or so other companies, all of which have a business model focused around gardening technology. Whippersnippers, lawnmowers, these sorts of things. And they all traditionally had their own technology. Some of that was digital or electric with their own batteries, right? So they had non-standardized proprietary standards for, recharging, for connectivity, for platforms, for applications, and so forth. And they decided, even though they're direct competitors, to engage in a joint alliance so that they can together develop and use standardized 18-volt battery systems for home and garden applications. So they actually want their own industry to be more standardized because they will all benefit from that more so than losing some competitive advantage. So these are alliances that are now increasingly used to produce the capabilities or get access to capabilities that you don't have, that you cannot integrate, or that are too expensive to acquire externally. And this brings us to the end. And just to recap, incumbent firms have very institutionalized practices, so sort of like established long-term practices for dealing with technologies. And they, in a way, these practices were always around safeguarding and improving operations, but not on being innovative or value-driven or customer-facing for that matter. These historically grown practices now in the digital age clash with emerging requirements and demand for digital innovation that firms and their customers have towards their IT departments. We want them to experiment, to explore, to offer new value propositions, to offer things that our customers would literally pay money for, more so than we want them to make our processes safer, or cheaper or faster. And in response, firms are now trying different strategies, technologically through platform strategies, financially through mergers and acquisitions, or organizationally through collaboration networks or alliances to update their capabilities, acquire their capabilities, integrate capabilities, or at least be able to access capabilities that they desire but do not have. And that brings us to the end of this video lecture. Again, thank you for watching, and thank you for listening.